We would like to welcome all our viewers. Uh, Today, we are very, very, very lucky to have Mr. Tish Malaba. Tish Malaba is an educator, a creative genius, a writer, an artist, a broadcaster, a town planner, and many more other things. I think he is best placed to tell us about himself than what I can do. Mr. Malaba, we welcome you on MBC today.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here.
Thanks very much. All right, let's go straight to the interview now. Mr. Malaba, we have heard about you, we know you briefly, but now we want to know you better. So is it possible for you just to give us your background in terms of where you were born, your parents, your siblings, if you have any, education-wise, your childhood experiences? Yeah?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I was actually born in a place called Sigangacha. It's in this area in Kezi.
Mm-hmm.
Kezi is Matobo district. So that's where I was born, actually. So I grew up there. I went to primary school called St. Sebastian School. Some call it Ganacha primary school.
Mm-hmm.
So from grade 1 to 7, then from there I went to Regina Mundi Secondary School for my O levels. Regina Mundi is in Kwai. From there I went for my A levels at Matopo High School.
Okay.
From Matopo High School, I was admitted to the University of Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm.
I did a BA General degree. After that, I did a lot of teaching, I would say. Well, not a lot, but 5 years.
Right.
5 years teaching at a school called JZ Moyo High School.
Which year did you teach at JZ?
I arrived there as a very, very young man. I remember when people were saying this is the youngest and smallest teacher ever.
Yeah.
That was 1996.
Okay.
So I was to the year 2000.
Uh-huh.
Then I left for South Africa. I was a teacher at a college called the Basa Tutorial College.
Okay.
So I left South Africa for Newcastle University.
Uh-huh.
I decided to change course and did a degree in town planning. I had always wanted to do something related to rural and urban planning and environment. So I took that. I did an honors degree at Newcastle University in the UK. Then I did a postgraduate degree again in town planning. Then I did another postgraduate degree in environmental management.
Mm-hmm.
Academically, that's been my journey.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I will take you back a little bit. The surname Malaba is a very big surname.
Mhm.
If you don't mind, if you can just tell us a little bit about that surname. What's the history of that surname, of that family?
Yeah, I'll try to be as brief. It's a long history, but I'll try to be as brief as possible.
That's fine.
To start with, the Malava history has been a secret for so long.
Okay.
I bet you don't. I can bet you don't know Malava history.
Mm.
I bet you I've approached so many historians in Zimbabwe, be it Ndebele historians, Karanga historians, English historians. They still don't know Malava history for the reason that it was kept a secret.
Okay.
But like I grew up in a family where when I was young, before I went to school, I remember my father and my grandfather used to sit us down and tell the Malava story. And they always said it was very, very important, but I always tried to ignore it.
Yeah.
But later on, when I learned methodologies, I ventured into it. So I'll also take this opportunity to announce that next year we'll be releasing the true Malava history. That some know, but they're not sure sometimes. For example, I'll give you an episode. I've read loads of Ndebele history. I have never seen a Ndebele historian telling me where young Lopemula was from 1841 to 1847. I've never. It is because of either omission or commission. I don't know. But since I was young, I've always been told that Lopemula grew up in the Malava homestead.
Okay.
So I went into that kind of research, tried to use the academic research methodologies to really crack onto that.
Yeah.
And really, like I'm telling you, I never ever encountered any historian who told me where Lopemula was at that period.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, which made me with my elders who were telling me that at that period, Lopemula was living at the Malava homestead. You know, so this is the kind of, it's so many things, really, really important things that need to be told about the Malava history. But briefly, the Malava people are the people who are connected with the Njelele shrine.
Njelele shrine, yeah.
Yes, many people know about where the Malava people were the custodians of the Njelele shrines.
Okay.
They were not the priests of the Njelele shrines, because by being custodians, they were like appointing priests. Like the priests of the Njelele shrines were the Lubimbi, which were the brothers of the Malava.
Okay.
And those were responsible for the Wasana, were the Chimba or the Mbikwa, who were also, but the Malava were the overall overseers.
Yeah.
That whole process.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, that's the history of the Malava. They are called the Venda Kalangas for some reason. They are called because we came from Venda in 1836 into Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So at the time we arrived, our people arrived in the modern day Zimbabwe. It was a time when the Ndebeles were arriving as well.
Okay.
We had the Malawi people had the first encounter with Mzilikazi in 1840, and ever since then, the Malawi people were never separated from the Ndebele state. They worked in that royal crawl from that period until 1893.
Okay.
When the whole Ndebele kingdom was.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. No. That's a very interesting history. I hope we will enjoy reading your book.
Yes. So look forward to the book. The official launch for the book. It was an academic research, but we tried to make sure that it is understandable.
Yeah.
To a layman, because people really want to know the history of the Malawi people, but at the same time, I didn't want to compromise the quality. The quality. So whether you're a professor or a villager in Kai, you'll still understand the book.
Oh no, that's excellent. That's excellent. So you have given us sort of your chronology in terms of when you were growing up until UZ and teaching. But let me take you back a little bit in terms of when you were young. You grew up in Caves, isn't it? Yeah. What sort of things as a young boy did you do?
Oh, a lot. I was the firstborn in my family, so I was like, to my father, I was his son. I was my father's son. Everywhere father went, he took me. But the thing is, my father was, I don't know what to call, but he was a zebra person. Although he used to do lots of running for the zebra forces and for ZAPU officials, which was a very, very dangerous game.
Okay.
And there was one man, especially in 1979, where I remember lots of things.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that setup. When my father would get arrested, many times he was arrested with me. I always told my mother now that I know you don't know the day when my father was arrested, because he was with me. Lots of times he was with me. Lots of times, it's unfortunate that I didn't feel that trauma. I think there was that acceptance that it was a war situation. Because times I saw my father being battered, brutally battered by the white soldiers, even like black police who were working for the gangs and all this stuff. And it was really, really tough. So he played his role well. Although when I compare now, looking at the situation now and compare to the efforts that he put, he lost a brother, because my father was not the firstborn yet. He was the second-born, but his brother went before he died there. They were first people, the first Zebra soldiers or guerrillas who were deployed from Zambia into Zimbabwe, and the game was a notch ahead of them, and they were killed just like that, easily, really, really easily. They lost their lives that way. But my father really fought heroically for the liberation of Zimbabwe. And as a young man, I was always there. Sometimes you go months, get arrested. You will come back and all sorts of things. So it taught me loads of things. It taught me loads of things. That sometimes you don't fight for yourself, you fight for for other generations. Because when I look at my father, vis-a-vis the efforts that he put in liberating Zimbabwe, what he got out of it, correspondingly, I would say Zen. Like nothing. It's just the efforts were not rewarded, but us, maybe the next generation are gonna benefit from his efforts.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, you really speak so warmly about your dad. Anything you want to say about your mom?
My mom, my mom, we used to call her, we used to call her the World Health Organization. Some called UNICEF, because I grew up in a family where any kid, who was just brought in there to live with us. Sometimes there would be 15 in the house, and sometimes it would be 6, 7. I never knew how many were in the family. It was people used to come and go. That's why we call it UNICEF, because she was just accepting kids and it's like she was that kind of a woman. Like I said, like I don't know, like in a modern sense, if she would have survived. Husband who spent most of his time away
being incarcerated,
fighting or in prison.
Yeah.
But she enjoyed all that, and so she's a proper a proper hero.
Yeah, she was a strong woman.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's excellent. Then you are known. What happened? Oh, okay. I just lost you.
Yes.
Just momentarily there. Yeah. Yeah. I was saying you are known for being involved in the entertainment industry in its broadest sense. If you can tell me what is it that exactly you do?
I'll say many people call me a jack of all trades. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm in. But when it comes to entertainment, I think that's my best space. That's my comfort zone. You know, from when I was growing up, like during Christmas festivals, I used to be a DJ. We never called nobody called me a DJ during that time, but you may have radio. During those festive season. So I was very, very alert on what kind of music to play. You know, we used to have competition like with other people, you know, like Injiva will bring their own radios, but we want audience in our family so that we enjoy. So it was a competition. There will be DJ somewhere there, and I'll be there. So I'll have to make sure that I please the crowd. So they started a very long time ago, and I've been involved in many projects. If you remember, I was at Shy FM as DJ News. I was at Afro Deep Radio. I've been a DJ. I even DJ just professional DJing, but I realized that I could write music. I could write and produce music. So I decided to venture into that, into production music. That's when I formed. I created the Sinazo. So Sinazo was a project that was supposed to involve Bulawayo, upcoming artists. But the aim was to uplift the Kalanga language and culture. Although we do songs in different languages, but our main objective is to promote the Kalanga language, because there are loads of Ndebele artists, Shona artists, artists who wanted to take that route. But at the same time, we wanted to create some kind of employment in Bulawayo. That's why we make sure that those who are involved in Sinazo should be based in Bulawayo. It's an unwritten constitution, but we try to make sure it happens that way. So it's a project that has been going well. Like the first time we released a song called Bukalanga, which played a lot in Botswana, but never played in Zimbabwe. Then our next song was Kalanga Child, which played in Zimbabwe for almost a year. Before the radio station played in Zimbabwe. And then I think it was one of the radio stations in Kwero and so forth that started playing it, and it went like big in all radio stations and so forth. So the project picked up at that juncture, and yeah, it was worth doing. So we continued doing it. And
So,
it was,
so you said the aim of this project was to uplift the Kalanga language and Kalanga culture. Would you say you are the pioneer, let's say, within the Kalanga music industry to come up with the house music?
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
We are the pioneers of Kalanga house music in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
We started to play that kind of genre.
Yeah.
We remember radio stations used to come to us and say, tell us, what's this kind of music? We've never heard it before. We say, this is Kalanga music.
Mm-hmm.
We have created it.
Yeah.
We have created it. Yes, there are some artists now who have followed suit are playing, I would say, Kalanga house as well.
Yeah.
But yes, we were the pioneers of that kind of genre.
Mm-hmm.
And we are happy to have had that kind of influence.
Yeah.
Because I know there are some musicians who have been there, who are older than me, who have been there, but they also now got Kalanga house music songs, you know what I mean? So it shows that really what we created was something of paramount importance.
Yeah, definitely. And you said you do write music. So
yes,
do you write for the group?
Yes, I do. I do write. I do everything for the group.
You do everything.
Yes, I do everything for the group because basically I'm part of the group. So, but I use a vocalist I write songs. I compose songs.
Mm-hmm.
I work with singers or vocalists.
Yeah.
To produce song, and I also work with other producers like we got award-winning producer called Percy. Just Percy is really good producer. Got good vocalists like Kalipi Lesbanda, Duduzi Lesbanda. They're really excellent vocalists as well. We have worked very well with them, and we produced music that resonate with the population, especially in Matabeleland and generally, and I would say Ukalanga in particular. So, yeah.
No, we also listen to it. Even if I don't understand Kalanga, but I like the music.
Yeah. I've got lots of British friends.
Yeah.
With my CD, we've got my CD. I was surprised by one British guy who showed me a CD. He said I got a CD in my car, and somebody told me it was your CD.
Yeah.
And he showed me. I was like, oh, yes. So music is a universal language.
Yeah.
Everybody understands. Yeah.
Definitely. So with the group Sinazo, you said they are all based in Bulawayo.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, how do you work? Because you are in the UK and they are in Bulawayo. So how do you work?
Before we used to travel a lot, like to go to Johannesburg or go to Bulawayo, do something. But now the technology allows me to sit here and produce a song and work with an artist in Bulawayo, another one in German, and another one in America, and they produce it while I'm sitting here.
Okay.
So it's so advanced now that it's not a big deal, really.
Yeah.
Because if I produce a beat and write a song, write the lyrics, and communicate with my vocalist and say, no, I want this song to go this like this, bang, bang, bang. This is the beat, and you go this way. We practice that way, and once she understands it, she records the vocals. I work with some of the producers like Percy I've just mentioned to really mix, master and sound engineer the track, and it's complete while we're sitting wherever we are.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's very interesting. So, with the group, do you have any new projects, any new songs coming up?
Yes, like I said, the lockdown has really disappointed us. This lockdown thing, we had loads coming, like tours, with Botswana tours coming, with UK tours coming, but there was this lockdown thing.
Yeah,
it was very unfortunate. But we are still got an album coming. We have released some singles from the album already. Some songs are playing, doing very well in radio stations, especially in Bulawayo, the Midlands, and Harare as well. So the album will be called Kezi Calling. So what is Kezi Calling? What it means is that my music calling took place in Kezi.
All right.
When I was called into the music industry, like I was telling you that I used to be a DJ. Although I was not called a DJ, although I'm not Kalisi Radio, but that's where my calling came from. So this album really is a dedication to myself.
Yeah. Okay. So do you sing?
Yes, I am a singer, but surprisingly, the kind of music that I'm producing, I feel I don't have to sing, really. I don't know why I don't compose the songs that I should sing. I've been in a choir from primary school. I was in a choir, secondary school, high school, in a choir. All my life I've been singing. But when I started producing my music, I don't know, maybe it's that that zeal to listen to, because of I've got my influence is more of DJ influence, you know. So I was influenced by these people like DJ Smooth, DJ Cleo, all the stuff. So I used to look up to them, and that's why I took that call, and I was like, okay, I want to be DJ Cleo. I want to produce music and have vocalists and so forth. So that's how it came from. So I never looked back. I never wanted to sing. I don't want to sing anymore in my songs. So I'm doing fine. I'll write songs, compose them, and do everything. But I'll let someone do the vocals for me.
Okay. So let's say within the Kalanga community, let's say in the UK, are there any projects that you are involved in?
Yes, I'm part of the Bukalanga Gathering executive team. Many people know the Bukalanga Gathering, annual Bukalanga Gathering event that take place every year in the UK. I'm part of that. I'm part of the organizing committee. So I'm really involved in many other projects that are pertaining to the Kalanga culture and Kalanga language. But the Kalanga Gathering, I would say, is the biggest one in the public, and it has been doing very well until all this lockdown.
Okay, so looking back, would you say the Kalanga language is getting stronger, the Kalanga culture is getting stronger? Oh, sorry, I just lost you.
No, but
Yeah, I was asking whether you think the Kalanga language is getting stronger, the Kalanga culture is getting stronger now, or not?
it is. It is. I'll say it's, the Kalanga culture organizers are the most organized people that I know now. So basically, I'll say the progress is really, really encouraging.
Yeah.
Kalanga language or Kalanga language is supposed to be one of the biggest languages. Sometimes I feel disappointed when I hear Kalanga being classified as minority language.
Mm-hmm.
Kalanga language is one of the first languages that was spoken in that country that is now called Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And it started from up Mavura Dona, that was Vulaya Dona, up there in Harare, going down to South Africa. You know, there's a place called Mapungubwe now in South Africa. No one speaks Kalanga there, but the name still remains. It shows you that the Kalangas were living there. So it was one. They covered one of the biggest geographical area ever.
Yeah.
So, and some of the languages, you know, like we put loads of dialects that came from Kalanga. Even Venda is a dialect that came from Kalanga. We got some dialects also in Shona, especially the Shabani Masingo.
Yeah.
Areas who changed, who got influence into other like more Shona, Zulu languages, but they were originally dialects of Kalanga. So it's not a minority language. It's one of the biggest languages in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that the people, especially the UK community, the Kalanga community, are really bringing it up, and they are really, really organized, and they always make really good organized events.
Yeah.
That promote Kalanga culture and language.
Okay. Do you face any resistance, let's say, from the Ndebele people?
Not really. I wouldn't say resistance, but there are things that sometimes create debate.
Yeah.
You know, people start debating about such things, like I was saying about Kalanga not being a minority language. Someone can say they have their own opposing points and so forth. I don't mind debate. I love debate as long as topics put out there. So sometimes the Ndebeles, usually they've got this thing of trying to challenge the Kalangas over some of the things. I don't see a problem with that. You know, Matabeleland is got so many tribes. So Matabeleland is the least tribal place, because they've got so many tribes, but they've lived together without any problem. There are vendors in Beibridge, Sutus in Kanda, there are Kosas in Tabazinduna, there are Ndebeles, there are Kalangas, there are Tongas, there are loads of other languages, but those people have been living in harmony. But the people have got the tendency, which is normal, like of describing each other. Things like that. I don't see any problem with that. You know, it's that kind of banter. It's like in a football, like Liverpool will be laughing at Man U and Arsenal and all sorts of things. But that's how life is. You know, like life goes on. So I haven't seen something that I can call a barrier in the development of Kalanga from Ndebele in particular. I take everything as a challenge. If somebody challenges you to a debate on a certain issue, then you think that person is bad, then you really have to revise your presentation skills, because anything challenges you, take that opportunity to make a presentation to them so that they end up understanding. Don't fight them. Don't insult try to debate and show the person, teach the person. It's because I'm a teacher, I would say. So I believe in trying to convince someone to a certain point.
Okay. What are your views about the installed Kalanga King, Mr. Moyo?
No, it's not the Kalanga King. No,
What do you mean?
No,
Kalanga King.
I don't know if you say Kalanga King. I think it's wrong. It's not a Kalanga King. I've read some mentioning that it's a recreation of the Mambo dynasty and so forth, which I've done a bit of study Mambo dynasty, but I was saying, like S.A. Malava.
Yeah.
Malava arrived in Zimbabwe there in 1836, I would say.
Okay.
Exactly in the year that the Mambo dynasty collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
But we were connected, the Malabar people were strongly connected to Bukalanga. When they were coming from Ovenda, Zimbabwe, they were looking forward to find that kingdom functional.
Yeah.
So it was a big disappointment that in that same year, the kingdom had collapsed. So the Malabar people never had any experience with the Mambo kingdom. Straight away, there was this Matebele kingdom, of which they were sucked into it, and they were asked to be officials into it until the end of it.
Yeah.
So, but my understanding of the Mambo dynasty, the last one was the Changamire Dombo one, the Chilisa Mulu one, which was Moyo.
Yeah.
So I think they are taking it from there.
From there. Yeah.
But I don't see any representation of that in the newly appointed king. I watched everything. I watched the installation.
Yeah.
I watched the dances that were happening there. I watched the language that was used there during the installation. I watched adverts, everything.
Yeah.
I could connect with the people that I know as descendants of the Chilisa Mulu dynasty, but I'm not an expert in it. But my direct answer to you is that, to me, I don't see him as a king of Wakalanga. Part of Wakalanga, yes, now. But
okay, all right. Before we conclude, you have written this book.
Yes.
Can you just briefly tell us what is it about?
This book really was. I was motivated to write this book during when I would say the economical situation in Zimbabwe was going down and people were living en masse to South Africa. And I looked at it and I was asking myself, how was their new life? You know? And there were lots of stories of Zimbabweans being associated with crime in South Africa because they were both there, and the whole job or industry or employment in sector is overpopulated, and people end up venturing into crime and all sorts of immoral activities.
Yeah.
So I created this Umlingiswa, a character that moved from Zimbabwe. If you read properly, that guy was born during the Matabeleland disturbances.
Okay.
Then he went with his father to live with his father wherever his father was coming from, and then he came back due to some unfortunate circumstances. Came back to Matabeleland. So everywhere he went, the environment didn't accept him.
Yeah.
Wasn't accepted in that environment. Then he, like any other Matabele boy or any guy from Matabeleland, you have to go to South Africa when you grow up, like because you know the situation, especially during that time. Then he went to South Africa as well, and still the environment didn't accept him. So he ends up being a rebel.
Yeah.
And start venturing into a lot of different. It's a crime thriller, I would say.
Okay.
So I would like to announce also that a movie is coming. It's called Igazi Lava for the movie.
Oh, okay. So it will be based on this book.
It's based on this book. Yes, the movie, this book. Everything is now set up. We are talking with the actors now, individual actors. We are making some negotiations, but the script is complete. The cameras are ready.
Yeah.
It's all now because well, I would say we are coming from a very, very low budget, or I would say a zero budget. So we have to script in the way we communicate with the actors. They have to understand the whole project from A to Z, so that they are involved in it. But it's coming up. It's a 2021 project, and it's coming.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Mr. Malava, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that I did not ask you?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. Maybe we'll find another time to discuss other things. But
Other things.
what we wanted to discuss today, I think we tried to exhaust as much as we could.
No, thanks very, very much. It was a pleasure and an honor having you on Matabeleland Broadcasting Corporation. We hope we will have another opportunity to host you again.
Thanks very much. It was an honor to us. Thanks very much, Mr.
Thanks a lot. All right.
All right.